there's the lighting change, there's the orientation change. I contrast this with what JPL gave the media. The conclusions we draw, the independent scientists, not all of them agree, but a significant core of them do agree, is that the formal odds, multiplying all those improbabilities together, finding those artificial features in a face, and all having the correct size, shape, location, and orientation, and with no similar objects anywhere else on the mesa to pick and choose the ones that just happen to be right for a humanoid face. The formal odds against all those things happening by accident are 1,000 billion to 1. What we conclude is, we think conservatively, that the artificiality of the face on Cydonia, reinforced by this set of tests, in addition to the 8 earlier tests, which aren't even included in that probability calculation, is established beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, the importance of that is not so much that the face on Mars is artificial, as that by establishing the artificiality of any one thing on Mars, then that removes the idea that things on Mars can be artificial from the status of an extraordinary hypothesis to the preferred hypothesis if you find something else nearby that looks artificial too. If you have one thing that's surely artificial and there's something else nearby that's suspect, then you can consider all the hypotheses, but artificial then becomes the preferred hypothesis in many instances rather than an extraordinary one. So that's the importance of the formal odds on this one and why I devoted a little extra time to it. And we have Stephen Goldberg's advice too, which is well known to scientists, but not frequently followed. The consequences of a claim that something is true are entirely irrelevant to the issue of whether the claim is true. So it doesn't matter what the consequences of artificiality is for deciding it. And so many people say, I just can't accept that it's artificial, therefore all these things you're pointing to must be coincidences. They work backwards and try to reason how things went wrong. But that's inductive reasoning, and that doesn't lead to unique solutions ever. This is the only slide in the set that's not of Mars. This one is of the Moon, and the reason I showed it is because early on in the space program, when we sent the lunar orbiter spacecraft to the Moon, one of the most interesting features it photographed on the Moon was this crater near the center of the front side, which seemed to have a triangular interior. And that looked a little suspect, possibly artificial. But later, the Clementine spacecraft went back and photographed it at high resolution, and this is the same crater. And we see that what appeared to be a crater triangle at low resolution, actually the sides are not all that linear, and the apexes are certainly not pointed, they're rather rounded. And we think it's more likely that this is simply a crater where the walls got pushed in on both sides by other impacts nearby. So it's probably not artificial. But yet this is the best example of a closed triangle found anywhere in the solar system of all the objects we've imaged with spacecraft now, anywhere in the solar system except, of course, on Earth due to the activities of humans, and on Mars, where we found about 100 triangles that are much better than this one. I'll show you just a few samples. Many of these seem to have a crater or other feature right at one apex, which is an interesting feature. Here's a triangle that's on a mesa, raised from the ground, with a feature at one apex. Here's a set of embedded triangles, the inner ones with a common apex, an outer one, a still larger one, and they're too faint to see from the audience there, but on a good high-resolution monitor, you can see 2 more triangles further out, all with a common apex. And you can see, again, a large crater at the apex of this middle triangle in the set. Here are, again, embedded triangles. And here are some features that have triangular faces but look pyramidal in character. This is the D&M pyramid I referred to before. It's been imaged many times now, and in one of the high-resolution images that showed the backside here, we see this feature, which we're tempted to think of as a possible entrance if this is indeed an artificial feature. The D&M pyramid, of course, is in the Cydonia region and relatively close to the face, so by the line of reasoning I gave you, it's reasonable to consider the artificiality hypothesis as not extraordinary for it because it's near the face. This is the same object seen in a mosaic of mixed resolutions. We see that it's on sort of a flow plane here, but an interesting object that begs for further exploration close up by landers. Now here's a low-resolution image with an interesting field of objects that all look sort of vaguely pyramidal in appearance, but at low resolution you can't really tell much. And here's a white strip that crossed one of these, and we see it at high resolution, and it looks very pyramidal. Well, if the one we got by chance at high resolution looks like this, we have to wonder about the others, which sort of tend to line up here, don't they, rather than be scattered about at random. So we, again, feel for exploration in the future. Wouldn't we love to have lots of rovers running around Mars and answering our questions? But our children will know the answers to a lot of these questions. Here's a mesa very similar to the face mesa, but just half of it. It looks like a construction that was not completed. Here is the sloping side of a pyramidal object, which has an interesting feature at its base, these parallel black and white lines. That could be explained by natural processes, by landslide down the slope of the pyramid, some sort of streaking. But if you look closely, just above this feature is almost its fainter mirror image, following the same curvature. It's almost as if we're seeing a reflection of it in the face of the pyramid. And some of these other features have possible reflections too. If these are reflections, then we're dealing with non-natural materials to manufacture these things, if they're artificial. So that would be suggestive of glassy or metallic objects. Here is a very interesting crater, unlike any other seen in the solar system, because it is so flat-bottomed with such steep high walls and of such a remarkably flat rim around it. And while it's not unusual for craters to have a central peak or other irregular feature near the center, here is a teardrop shape well off to the side, which is unprecedented, to be so regular and yet so displaced from the center. As I say, there's nothing like it anywhere in the solar system except its twin 20 kilometers to the south. The rim looks so flat in this image that you could visualize driving a bicycle around on it. Here is a crater with what looks like a geodesic dome in its interior, a couple hundred meters in diameter. Here are some what look like crystalline fractures, again suggesting artificial materials. Here are some odd, very unnatural-looking shapes, an arrow, a rectangular shape with a circle, and a stair-step shadow. Here are some white surface markings that don't look very random, and there are others of their kind. Here are some shapes, again, that defy normal geological processes that we're familiar with. We know how to make trenches, but not trenches in T-shapes by natural processes. And a crater wall that's this flat-bottomed and with walls that steep can't be made by impact, and certainly neither can this, because you can't excavate by impact. You make craters by impact through explosions. So they're always circular or very mildly elliptical, not that elongated and deep. Here are other objects that look artificial in their own way, something like highways or white marks that travel across the plains. There are many features of this type. Here's an area that has what look like pathways. This is very reminiscent of the roadways used by ancient civilizations as found by archaeologists and geologists on Earth. And they aren't random. They tend, wherever they intersect, there tend to be a lot more of these small square or rectangular boulder shapes, which are about the right size in many cases to be built